All right. So in front of me here is a keyboard known as the NocFree Lite. This keyboard was sent to me for review. It came in this box. This box you can kind of open up and split, kind of just like this keyboard. Now about that though, this keyboard was sent to me for a review, which means that I did not pay with this with my own money. That is also why this YouTube video will have a little sponsored tag. But I do think it's important to emphasize that even though this was sent to me, everything that you're about to hear, my opinion is definitely still my own. I was not necessarily influenced to say anything nice about this keyboard in particular. I was offered a affiliate link, but I refused it. I do think that keyboard reviews on this channel are better if there's no financial incentives to sort of muck about. So that said, this is a split keyboard. What is interesting about it? Well, the fact that it's split is definitely cool because it basically means that your shoulders are a bit more free and open, so you're going to do less hunching forward. So you could argue that that's definitely more ergonomic. On top of that, it is relatively affordable to maybe do an upgrade and get these palm rests as well. That means that your palms can sort of rest a bit more. So that's also kind of nice and comfy. But I would argue here where it starts being a little bit different than other keyboards is that there's also a little bit of tenting in this guy. So on the bottom here, there's a flap. You can open it. And by doing that, you kind of get this angle such that your hand isn't flat on the table or on the keyboard. There's actually a little bit more of a curve. And that actually is a little bit more comfortable. If you think about the natural resting position of your hand next to your body, next to your waist, then you'll notice that you're not going to put your hand like this next to your waist. It's going to be kind of like the handshake, so to say. And you can maybe also argue that if you want to be comfortable, it helps to maybe have an angle go slightly up. And kind of the cool thing about these palm rests is that there's little magnets inside of them. And you can put little legs under them that just sort of click. And lo and behold, your palm rests can also be tented at the same height. And, you know, I would argue this is pretty cool. Not a lot of keyboards do this. This definitely feels a bit more comfortable than if this was flat to me. My hands are definitely a little bit more in the resting position. I would personally have preferred it maybe if like the tenting angle was just a little bit more extreme. If I just put this cardboard box under here, it does feel in terms of the angle that this is more comfortable. So part of my review back was to advise them if they want to be a bit more distinctive, then maybe add like an extra flap in here that allows you to have like a more extreme tenting angle. I do think that would be a nice improvement. But just this as is pretty cool. Like not a lot of keyboards do this. And there's a bunch of split keyboards that definitely do the split thing. But keyboards that do the splitting and the tenting, you know, okay, cool. This is definitely kind of nice. Now, in terms of the ergonomics, I do want to maybe observe that there's, you know, it's not the worst, but you do see that there is a sort of angle going up here, which means that if I put my hand on it, even if there's a palm rest, my hand is doing a little bit of this. It is a 5-degree angle, so it's not, you know, the biggest degree ever. It's not like my wrist got to do this. But my advice would have been to maybe keep it flat instead. This is not something that they will change anytime soon, but they did acknowledge that their main ergonomic benefit would be to tent to the outside. They're not doing tenting the other way around. But okay, so far so good, I suppose. Typing on this thing feels pretty solid. I got the device that also has some extra foam in it, so in terms of like keyboard sound, I do think this is, you know, it has some density to it, so it feels pretty good. But when you open up the box and you look at everything that's in it, one thing you will also notice that there's a bunch of cables that you can use to plug everything together. Now, the cable that connects both halves does come with a little warning label. And the warning label tells you that for charging or wired mode, you first have to connect both halves, and otherwise you risk damage to the internals. I have seen that before, maybe a bit more on hobbyist keyboards. It's the first time I've seen it on a keyboard like this. But I do advise people to take it serious because you don't want to damage your board by accident. Now, the other thing that I do want to mention about the cable that connects both of these halves together is if you have a look, you will notice that one input here is mini USB, which would be the cable that connects both halves, and the other one is just USB-C. I think in this day and age, USB-C is definitely more the norm, so I think I would have preferred it if this mini USB cable was just a normal USB-C cable. I have seen other boards do it. The cable that you get does feel premium, so it's not like a thorn in my eye or anything, but that would be something I would consider if they ever make a second version of this. But okay, both halves are connected, which means I can now put the main cable in, and that means I can go ahead and start typing. In general, I have found the typing experience to be kind of what you would expect from a split keyboard. But if we're going to talk about the typing experience, then one thing that I think makes it a whole lot better than just a base split keyboard is the fact that you can also program it. Because that means that you can take some keys that are very far away, like this backspace over here, and maybe put it in a place that's closer for your hand, like the caps lock button over here. And that is something that I've definitely done. Another thing that I've done is I've installed home row modifications, which means that if I just tap F, that's just a normal letter. But if I keep F pressed down, then suddenly that turns into a shift. Again, that's something that I can do such that my hand can really just try to stay in one place and that they don't have to move around as much. But the way that you configure that is basically via a web browser. If you've seen other episodes of this series, you'll have seen this software called VIA, V-I-A. But this keyboard actually syncs up via something called VIAL. VIAL.rocks is the website you're going to have to go to. This is what it looks like when you're there. You hit Start VIAL, you connect to the keyboard. This all happens via web USB, by the way. And then you get this little interface. Now on top over here, you see the layout of the keyboard in question. And what you can just go ahead and do is you can click any button that you want to change. And you can go down below here to select the button that you want there to be. There's a few standard things in here. So for example, there is a layer switch that you could do. So for example, I have this layer 1 over here that has all of my special characters. It also turns all these number keys into F keys. All that good stuff can be found over here. There are some home row modification buttons that I've mentioned before. The way that you go about configuring that, I think is kind of cute too, by the way. So let's say this button over here. If I want that to be left shift, then I need to go to the quantum tab over here and I can select left shift. I can go here again. I can click the inside and then click F. And this way, if I keep it pressed down, it's left shift. And if I just tap it, it becomes F. And it's all pretty easy to click together, really. So I would argue that's pretty good. Another thing that's a nice touch, which VIA doesn't offer, is you can also add combos. Basically, that means that if you keep two keys pressed at the same time, like F and D, for example, that can trigger left shift as well. That's something you can totally configure if you want. One use case for that might be that if you keep, let's say, G and H pressed together, which would maybe normally not happen as much, that then you trigger escape, and that way you maybe don't have to do this movement so much. I mean, I'll leave it up to you if this is something you want to do, but the fact that this is easily configurable, I do think is a nice touch. And finally, there's also this tap dancing feature, which I thought was kind of cute. So tap dancing basically allows you to say, well, there's this one button, and if I tap it, it does something. If I hold it, it does something. If I double tap it, it does something else all together. And if I tap and hold something, it also does something else. You could use this to configure home row modifications, but the main thing that I think is cool about this configurator is that you can also set the tapping term for each button that you configure. So how long do I keep a button pressed down before it's a hold or when it's a tap? That is something that you can configure per tap dancing combo as much as you like. The configurator is actually pretty good. It's better than VIA, I think, just out of the box. So in terms of configuration options, you're pretty good. But that said, there is one thing that this configurator doesn't do, and that's in the lighting department. So what I can do from here is I can say, well, you know what? I would like you to have a gradient color on the keyboard. And you can see sort of the lights just flare up. You can also do the fancy spiral thing, where all the colors sort of just appear and all of that good stuff. And, you know, if you're into that, that's cool and that's fine. I find this to be too distractive. What I would have preferred if I were able to sort of say, well, these home row buttons are special. I want them to be a different color than all the other keys on my keyboard. And that is something you cannot configure, which is a downside. It's not the biggest thing, but it is good to know that, like, if you're expecting that behavior, that is something you cannot configure from this configurator. You're going to have to maybe program the board manually, writing some custom software if that's something you want to do. Now, one thing that I did find in this configurator, which I thought was kind of cute, is there is this typing heat map setting. It's a minor thing, but like one thing I can do now is I can sort of hit some buttons real quick. And at some point, you can see these buttons become kind of hot. You can also sort of smash this guy, and you can also see that become kind of hot. And eventually, it all starts to cool down again. It's a minor thing, it really is, but I did think this was kind of like a cool and fun animation that doesn't necessarily distract me, but still offers something kind of cool, something that the RGB shows off. If you want to buy this keyboard without the RGB, it is a bit cheaper. I don't think you need the RGB, but if you really like these fancy effects, then you can still kind of go nuts, I guess. So, having talked about the configurator, one thing that might be cool to maybe mention at this point is, I guess, the switches that I was able to get with it. You have the option of buying silent switches, and the thing with silent switches is they are kind of nice if you work in an office. And the best way to maybe explain that is to just show you. So, under the escape key, I have a normal tactile switch from Gateron. When I hit it, you can definitely hear it. It's not super loud or anything, but you can imagine if you're typing away, your colleagues will notice. The silent switch that I got from them is on number 1, and it sounds like this. I can actually imagine if you want to hear it, I need to keep it next to the mic, but this is the normal switch, and this is the silent switch. It is definitely way more silent. It's not a reason to buy the keyboard, but the reason I do think it's maybe good to mention is because it does seem to fit kind of the design idea behind this keyboard. I think the creators really wanted to have a keyboard that is a pretty easy entry point for someone who wants to have something more ergonomic, but still has something that they can easily bring to the office, let's say. Because you gotta be honest, like these Mac keyboards, they are like pretty silent in the office and they're therefore appreciative. I can definitely imagine like having some silent switches that will be useful. The folks over at NocFree also told me that they are interested in maybe producing their own silent switch at some point, which isn't live yet, but it fits the design philosophy, and that can be useful to sort of keep in the back of your mind. There was some feedback I did give the folks over at NocFree, which I'll also just share here. This is the switch puller that they gave me, and I compared it to the switch puller that I have. It is a minor thing, but you might be able to see that this switch puller over here doesn't have a flat head. It kind of curves. And if you compare it to this other switch puller, which has a way more flat head, it is way easier to pull out a switch with this guy compared to this one. So they are checking if they can source different key pullers. It's not a very bad key puller or anything like that, but I did mention to them that this one was better, and they are investigating if they can switch the key puller now, which is good. Another thing that's also maybe good to mention is that this keyboard can also do wireless. I'm not a fan of wireless. I really like my stuff to be plugged in because then I'm 100% sure it works. But if you are interested in wireless, you do get this little dongle that you can, this one, that you can put into your computer as normal. The one thing that I did get on this device is you can see that there's a little magnet and a little shape at the bottom. So you can put the dongle in there for safe keeps. However, it falls out rather easily. So if I give it a small hit, then you will notice it falls out quite quickly. I discussed this with them, and they seem to be aware of the problem. They showed me a video where a newer version might have a bit more of a clicking mechanism in here that makes it harder for it to fall out. It's not necessarily a deal breaker for me either way because I don't necessarily use the wireless. But if it is a deal breaker, do know that you can also just put it in your bag. You can also buy an extra dongle, maybe one for your home, one for your office, or something like that. Now, another thing that's also maybe good to know is that you can buy this keyboard with some extra foam in it. And that foam, at least that was the case for my device, you can see that little LED button over there. Sometimes the foam is over a LED button. So when I got this keyboard, I initially thought that one of the LEDs was broken. It turns out that wasn't the case. It was just the muting foam was over it. To fix that, all you got to do is get a pair of tweezers and sort of wiggle it out. Not the biggest issue, but if that happens to you, do know that you can kind of fix it. Now, in terms of like real flaws, I guess the big weird thing with this keyboard is kind of hidden under a switch. And I do want to maybe just show that. It is maybe a minor thing for you, but at the same time, it can also be a deal breaker. Probably not to everyone, but I do want to be honest about it. What I'm about to do is I'm about to pull out these 3 switches. So that's the switch under button number 2, under button number 3, and button number 4. And I'm hoping that the light is bright enough for you to see. But hopefully you can kind of see that there are these holes, right? So the thinking is I have a switch over here. This switch in particular has like 5 pins, 2 metal ones, 1 thick one in the middle, and 2 on the side. And you can see those 2 holes on the side over here as well. But if you squint your eyes, you might be able to see very clearly on this one that one of the holes actually shines a bit. And that is because something is indeed in the way. If I take the switch that was under key number 2, and if I try to put that on place number 3, then I can press for what I like, but it's not going to go in. And the same holds for 4. It's just not going to fit. But if I push it down onto slot number 2, nice and snug. If you then inspect these 2 switches, right, then you are going to notice that even though this is technically a 5-pin switch, some of the pins have actually been removed. And I asked about it, and they confirmed it. I think they just used a pair of scissors to sort of cut one out. I told the folks over at NocFree about it, and they confirmed that this was indeed the case. Apparently, there's a little bit of equipment under here that they can't move anywhere else, which is why there are 2 places for your switch where you cannot use a 5-pin switch. You got to make a little cut to the switch. Now, in fairness, this won't be a problem for every switch out there. This is a Keychron brown switch I just have lying around. And if you have a quick look, you're going to notice that there are no like extra pins on this guy. But then again, there are also these other 5-pin switches that do carry those like extra pins in the middle. And those are not going to fit directly into this keyboard. You are going to have to make a cut on the switch itself, which is basically what they did. Now, this to me does feel a bit awkward, and it is definitely like a bummer, but I am going to leave it up to you to determine whether or not this is a deal breaker. If you're not interested in using 5-pin switches, then you're probably going to be just fine. But if you do happen to have 5-pin switches, this can be super annoying if you're interested in switching the switches. Because you got to imagine, like, maybe you cut one of these switches, but then you also got to keep track of the switch that you cut when you put them all in like a little bin of switches. Keep that in mind. Like, this is definitely, I think, the main weird thing that I found with this keyboard. The fact that these 2 switches might need to be cut if they're 5-pin, yeah, this is a bit awkward. That said, I do think it's fair to say that this keyboard has a few things going for it, and the easiest way to explain that is to go to their product page. So, this is what their product page looks like. If I go to this NocFree Lite keyboard, if I just go for the normal top print keycaps, which were the keycaps that I found to be the nicest, I also had these gray keycaps, and they're fine, but you pay extra for them. If you get them with the silent switches or the tactile ones, they're the same price. If you get them with no RGB, then just the keyboard is $180. If you add to that the palm rest and the carrying case, which, by the way, is a fair carrying case. You can put the keyboard in here. There's a little extra pouch for your cables, so the carrying case could be useful. If you're going to the office with it, I definitely recommend it. But if you get it with the palm rest and the carrying case, then you would be $210. However, if you refresh the page a couple of times, you can sign up for their mailing letter, which gives you $10 off. So that means that basically the somewhat full package is about $200. Maybe a little bit extra if you want an extra dongle or sound-absorbing foam or something like that. But if you were to compare $200 to something you might pay for like a more premium ergonomic keyboard, those things are typically like double the price. So you could maybe wonder, one of the cool things about this keyboard is that maybe it is just a bit cheaper. Maybe it can be seen as a kind of keyboard that's meant for the more standard keyboard enthusiast that's just looking for something a bit more ergonomic. And if you're not immediately ready to sort of pay $350 or even higher amounts of money for a more ergonomic keyboard, then yeah, this might be okay. I mean, I do think having more extreme tenting would make it better. I do think having columnar layouts would make it better. If you buy a more expensive keyboard, you do get better software. All of those points are valid, but then you are paying for a more expensive keyboard. So the way I would look at it is if you're looking for an entry into the more ergonomic world, the fact that it's split and the fact that it's programmable are definitely big pluses. The fact that it's cheaper is definitely a plus as well. The 5-pin thing with the buttons over here, though, that definitely does feel a bit awkward. So definitely think about it if that's maybe a deal breaker for you. There is a Discord channel you can also join if you have more precise questions. People do seem to be pretty active there. I think it's fair to say, like, if you want to have a keyboard that's easy to bring to the office and is kind of like a good intro keyboard, that's not too expensive, there's definitely stuff to like here, even though this is awkward with the switches there.